In 2021, Apple brought in over $15 billion USD in revenue, with Tencent bringing in over $32 billion. $47.6 billion, or $130 million in a day, was brought into those two companies last year just on mobile gaming. So yes, mobile gaming is very important, but here's the thing. Neither company makes a gaming-centered mobile device. The iPhone is not made with gaming in mind, and Tencent doesn't even make any consoles of any sort. Clearly, it's not as important as it seems, but at almost $1 billion in revenue a week, companies will try to capitalize on that. Enter the ZTE-made Nubia REDMAGIC 6S Pro, the gaming-centered phone. Now, I already reviewed this phone and even used it for an experiment, but now I'm back to relive using this phone. You know what to do with the socials, so let me just tell you about this device. Now, this tall and large phone has almost everything you want spec-wise. 6.8-inch 1080p OLED display with a refresh rate of 165 Hz, 700 nits of brightness, pretty good front-facing speakers and a fingerprint scanner, 720 Hz touch sampling rate. Just as reference, the iPhone runs at 240 Hz, a Snapdragon 888 Plus chip, this one having 16 gigabytes of LPDDR5 RAM and 256 gigabytes of UFS 3.1 storage, with 5G support, a turbocharging fan, 5050 mAh battery with up to 66 watts of charging, shoulder triggers, a swipe sensor on the back, lights on the back, and cameras. Now that we got all of that out of the way, let's talk about the phone. Day-to-day usage, it's just a normal phone. There's some quirks to get used to, like closing the apps doesn't always close every app, including the one that you're in, or the always on display that doesn't actually stay always on, or the eye care mode that doesn't follow the schedule that you give it. Even after all the updates that this phone has received, it's still on Android 11 and still has grammatical errors and misspellings. With all this said, the processor, RAM, and storage speed all add up to a stupid fast and smooth operating system. Also, thanks to that display. Most animations are at about 60 to 120 Hz, so leaving this phone at 165 Hz isn't needed, but that option is there. Even with the 128GB base, storage isn't an issue even if you do have a bunch of music on here, which will sound awesome thanks to that almost front-facing speaker stereo setup. While not the best, the sound is still really good. Apps load fine, though I did notice that Twitter would soft reset randomly, but I only noticed in that specific app. While this is a gaming phone, the phone aspect is not that bad at all, being similar to a modern ZTE phone because again, Nubia is a ZTE brand. This part's weird because ZTE isn't allowed in the United States, kind of. They can use American parts but can't sell in America. None of it makes sense, but there's also something weird about the 5G connection. While the internet is good, the actual connection is weird. On T-Mobile at least, when the signal drops, it goes away for a decent amount of time before coming back. In practice, this didn't cause many issues when texting, as the signal would be back in time and I wouldn't really miss any of my calls. Still, the internet would drop out, and again, just to be clear, it's only in the areas where there is no signal, but it would take a little bit longer to find a new tower when compared to other phones. The signal issue does go farther than that though. At this moment, T-Mobile uses the 5G bands 71 for low tier, while 41, 258, 260, and 261 are the higher ultra capacity tier bands. Of those bands, this phone only has support for band 41. So think 20% of the 5G's total connection, with the average being around 10 to 30% of the time my phone would actually say 5G and would actually be 5G. If ever, really. For those that care, will. For those that don't, won't. Just like the cameras. 64 megapixel main, 4 total cameras, 8K at 30 frames per second with HDR support, dedicated macro and ultra wide sensor, and slow motion at 1080p 240 frames per second. All sounds pretty good, but produces boring and weak shots and videos, thanks to the lack of optical image stabilization and pretty much proper optimization. There's a ton of features in the camera app, but the actual camera itself isn't really that good. With that said, it is a gaming phone, but the front camera doesn't look good either. And that's something you might use during gaming, not too much though. At least the battery kind of saves this phone, easily lasting a day, even with a decent amount of game time or content viewing. And viewing you will. This screen looks pretty good, even at 1080p, but that 700 nits and 165 Hz makes everything bright and super smooth. Not to mention, it is an OLED display. With all this said, this phone does get hot, and look, this is why I don't actually think gaming phones should even exist. All of this stuff, 20,000 RPM fan, cooling system that has a max cooling of 60 Fahrenheit, which would only happen when you stop playing on this phone. There's no way they mean that in-game. And then we have all this stuff to cool a very hot chip, but it feels just like my Samsung Z Fold 3, not only in performance, but also from heat, out of a smaller and more sealed off frame that lacks a fan. There is one saving grace from the gaming aspect, and I'll talk about that a little bit later, but other than that, there's not really much that's overkill for this daily driver, but it all combines to create a more awkward setup. Gaming on this is the main goal, right? No one buys a race car to not race it, or a laptop to use it on a desk. They buy gaming phones to play games, but just like the PlayStation 5, it's nice that it can do a lot of other things and do those pretty fast. Now for me, I don't game that much, and honestly, I did a decent amount only when I was using this phone. Even when I film video, I don't like to make the image look unreal, which is the main reason why I don't actually edit photos, only video. But what I mean is I don't know what to look for on a gaming phone. But moving from consoles to phones, this is what I've looked for, and this is what I found and enjoyed. After complaining about the heat of the phone, I dropped down performance modes, and honestly, I didn't notice any difference whatsoever, whether we're talking about heat or performance. But the main things that I do love about this phone are the air triggers and audio. Going to a phone that doesn't have these air triggers is kind of miserable, as I myself am a miserable person, at least in the PC community, for one, owning a Mac, and two, using strictly game controllers when I do play games. The air triggers almost give that feel with a little bit of feedback, but I'm telling you, this is way better than using just the on-screen buttons. You can set up macros and different methods to use those triggers, and there's also a swipe option on the back of the phone. I didn't really know what to do with that, and I do own a PS Vita. Then the audio is honestly spectacular. It isn't any MacBook Pro speakers, but it's still pretty crisp and loud. But it's so easy to block the bottom one with the air trigger. They really should have given this phone true front-facing speakers only. But that's about it. The way I see it, the reason that you're watching these types of videos is to see what makes a gaming phone so special. And honestly, I would say it's really just air triggers and the audio setup. It does have a headset jack after all. I would like the air triggers to actually click so you had more tactile feedback, but I know some phone company does do that. But for those that want purely capacitive, this is the perfect phone for you. I wanted to make this video how I want, kind of walking besides my normal review path, because I didn't really think that I was going to make this type of video for this phone. It's a gaming phone. It's too expensive to give to a child, it's lacking the games that would make this better than a Nintendo Switch, and it's not even close to a home console, but costs more than all of them. But it's a phone too, and honestly a pretty fast one. If you're in a Wi-Fi area all the time, it's easy to recommend this phone. It's a large gaming phone that does all three of those very well, but not perfectly. Speaking of perfect, let's talk about today's video sponsor, me. Okay, I'm not perfect, but I do sponsor all my videos, and I spent $860 on this phone and made around $10 on ad revenue when I reviewed this phone. But that's perfectly fine. I want to be able to make content indefinitely and know that it will cost a lot of money over the years. If you do want to help out, you can do it a few ways, ranging from free to $1 or more, or whatever Amazon's cheapest product is, maybe this $3 ring. Either way, simply watching my video with ads helps support my channel at no cost to you. I do also have a Patreon, but have no idea what I'm going to do with that or how the pricing tiers are going to be set, at least not until I figure out what I'm going to put on there. Lastly, if you use Amazon, there's a link in the description that will hopefully give me a single-digit percentage as a referral. If you don't like Amazon or somehow Patreon, again, simply watching my videos with ads helps. Regardless, thank you all for the support that you've given me. After that 192 words of self-sponsored talk, or about 12% of this video, I think this review is over. I definitely missed some things, and if you feel like I didn't really answer some of those questions, you could definitely check out my past review that I did on this phone that's a little bit more in-depth. I would also recommend you watching other videos before you do buy this phone, but if you do decide to buy this phone, or anything that goes with it, there are going to be some affiliate links in the description to whatever I feel seems right for the REDMAGIC 6S Pro. Anyways, I hope you enjoy the video and the channel. Comments are still below, and as always, thanks for watching.